Hello and welcome to Brain Power. I'm your host Thomas Trombley, and we'll be discussing topics ranging from current news, world events, and religion. Basically, whatever bit of news that catches my eye. If you have a story you'd like covered here or a question you'd like answered, send me a message on Twitter at BrainPowerUp. Use the hashtag BrainPowerUp, like the group at facebook.com/BrainPowerOnline, or visit the website at brainpoweronline.webs.com. Today's Sunday, June 14th. And going back to the more traditional format of this show, I guess you could say, I'm gonna start doing some news stories here. Actually, I'm gonna start things off with one that really kind of put a smile on my face. It's really sad that something like this even had to happen. Because I'm just flashing back to when I was in school. Sure, cell phones were around. They were prevalent. Everybody had them. Everybody used them. But, we didn't have smartphones when I was in high school. So I guess they weren't really that big of an issue. Because, when I was in school, kids were just texting, not playing Angry Birds and whatnot. Anyway, a Florida science teacher has been suspended for running a signal jammer to prevent his students from using their cell phones in class. School board members in Pasco County approved Dean Liptak's 5-day unpaid suspension yesterday. Liptak didn't contest the decision. Officials say Liptak activated the jammer in his 5A high school classroom from March 31st through April 2nd. Verizon Techs found the jammer, a district rep tells the Tampa Tribune, after they walked the school with a device that could detect a jammer. It honed in on his classroom. She says, the whole time they thought it was a kid. Liptak later told a school district investigator that he never intended to cause problems. He said he thought the jammers were allowed as long as they were not intended for malicious purposes. Superintendent Kurt Browning wrote in a reprimand letter that Liptak had potentially violated federal law and that the signal jamming could have potentially interfered with others trying to call 911 during an emergency. Since the incident happened, so many teachers have come up to me and said that they were thinking of getting one and using it in their classroom, Liptak wrote to the school. I told them, no, don't do that. They're not allowed. And it's, once again, I can understand the reasoning that would bring a person to think, hey, you know what, let's jam the signals here so they can't use their phones. But I don't know. It's, as is stated, yes, that is at least close to coming in violation of federal laws and regulations. So that's, I don't know, that's something I'm not sure I would do, but anyway, here's kind of another funny one. Apparently, for Logan Shawless, it's not a party unless you're demanding to see license and registration from passing drivers. Police say the 19-year-old Pennsylvanian set up his own DUI checkpoint early on Saturday, complete with flares, a BB gun, handcuffs, and a portable scanner. The slight problems with this scenario are that, 1, police say that Shawless was under the influence himself at the time, and 2, well, police caught on to his little ruse. When they arrived, they say Shawless tried to hand the BB gun to a passenger, saying, "I can't get caught with this." One driver who was stopped said Shawless told him he was setting up roadblocks and that they should have read about it in the newspaper. Adds a neighbor per WTAJ, we saw cop cars, we saw flares, we couldn't figure out what was going on. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Shawless faces a litany of charges: carrying a firearm without a license, driving under the influence of alcohol, unlawful restraint, official oppression, criminal coercion, reckless endangerment, impersonating a public servant, harassment, disorderly conduct, and public drunkenness. Holy crap. Can anybody say I'm throwing the book at you? Wow. It's... But, once again, it's... Really, any time you impersonate an officer, I can see them saying, okay, you know what, we're going to tack on every single charge we can find for you. So I guess that is kind of understandable, in a certain light. Here we go. You guys remember planking? It was kind of big a couple years ago. The whole thing is, you sit on your forearms in a push-up position, basically, and oh yeah, that's the cool thing. You just stay straight and flat like a plank. Anyway, George Hood has been breaking world records for 30 years, starting in 1986 when he jumped his way into Guinness by skipping rope for more than 13 hours. Now, the 57-year-old ex-Marine and ex-DEA agent and personal trainer and group exercise instructor has another athletic feat under his belt: the People's Plank, a 5-hour, 15-minute, and 15-second plank that he pulled off on Saturday in Oceanside, California. Hood's abdominal bridge, which is planking, resting on your forearms in a push-up position for as long as you can, beat the record of 4 hours 26 minutes set by a Chinese police officer in September. To put those times in context, the San Diego Union-Tribune notes that a typical plank is 1 minute. A greater challenge for most people would be 5 minutes. Hood trained for 9 months, 4 to 6 hours a day, with at least 30 hours of planking thrown in every week. During his record attempt, Hood asked for as many distractions as possible. He chatted with the support crew there to place ice chips under his achy elbows, concentrated on music blaring from the loudspeakers, and studied objects that spectators placed on the mat in front of him. One thing he didn't focus on was time. No one was to tell him how much longer he had until he broke the record. Hood's world record wasn't only meant to reassert his planking powers. He had held the record before Mao Weldong beat it last fall. He was also there to raise money for injured U.S. service members. The discomfort that I feel right now pales in comparison to what they feel, he told NBC. Pardon. And that's, once again, planking, I've always looked at that as kind of a stupid, silly stunt that, that kids and teenagers did. So, a part of me kind of dies a little inside thinking of a 57-year-old ex-Marine planking. But I do feel kind of good, though, about it because, number one, he's raising money for injured servicemen. Servicemen and servicewomen or service members, whatever you prefer. He got back into the Guinness Book of World Records again. That's kind of cool, I guess. It's if you have a talent of any kind and you can be the world's best at it, why not? My goodness. I think I feel a cold coming on. Oh, yay. There we go. Indiana's religious freedom law is already hilariously backfiring. Now, if you're familiar with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, basically that's a piece of legislation that lets Christians discriminate against gays. But basically it says whatever my religion says, you have to allow me to do, or you have to allow to happen. Which it doesn't take a genius to figure out how that can backfire. But here we go. If you're someone who pays attention to things, it's not hard to figure out that Indiana's religious freedom law, also known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, is just a sneaky way Christian folks oppress gay people. I just find that funny that that's exactly what I just said. But now that the legislation is in effect, it's having some amusing unintended consequences. This Tuesday, Indiana was forced to recognize the first church of cannabis. And you don't have to guess what their favorite religious ritual is. The First Church of Cannabis is a relatively new denomination set to hold its first services on July 1st, the first day that the religious freedom law goes into effect. And by obtaining recognition from the state under the new law, church members, who call themselves Canitarians, will reportedly be allowed to light up during their church services, even though they will practice in a state where marijuana is still a highly illegal substance. It's all thanks to Indiana's recently reinforced religious freedoms. The church still can't buy or sell marijuana under the law, but Bill Levin, the self-described Minister of Love and Grand Poobah, says parishioners will still be allowed to smoke out during church services. Another way the law has benefited the church was the tax-exempt status it was granted last week by the IRS. Somebody at the IRS loves us because we got it back in less than 30 days, Levin wrote on the group's Facebook page. The First Church of Cannabis has already collected $11,000 from more than 600 members on its GoFundMe page. If you're wondering what the minimum donation is, it should be a no-brainer. $4.20. And for anybody that's interested, that page is gofundme.com/Church of Cannabis. It's as I've stated on a few of a couple previous episodes, a couple previous news stories. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a pot smoker. I'm not interested in the culture. Well, I love stoner movies, but personally, this kind of scares me a little bit, just because this is setting kind of a dangerous precedent. Because if they can say that, okay, well, this illegal substance is what is required for our religious services, this is just marijuana. This is not that big a deal. I'm worried more about the group that'll come up in 6 months to a year that says, hey, you know what, meth is required for our religious services, so you need to let us, do crystal meth. It's, I don't know, it's just my opinion. I could be wrong, I guess. Anyways, speaking of other things that would, slightly upset people or anger people, 19 women became the first to attend the Army's elite Ranger School in late April. 16 of them made it through the first day. 8 were allowed to recycle through the program, and 0 will be going on to the next mountain stage of training, reports the Army Times. Though 3 have been invited to start the new Ranger School from scratch in 3 weeks, the failure rate, by comparison, a total of 195 out of 381 male soldiers will move on, has some muttering about revisiting Ranger standards to make sure they're gender neutral. The Christian Science Monitor talks to some Rangers who think the deck is stacked, with one saying women will always fight to meet the male standard, even if it's arbitrary and kind of stupid. At issue are physical standards that some say are outdated as military technology advances, as well as whether incorporating women into the Army's upper echelons could actually strengthen leadership. Ranger School is so physically rigorous that my feet didn't feel the same for literally 2 years, says one Ranger. But I can't honestly say I learned much in terms of leadership. Not so fast, says Army Chief of Staff Ray Odierno? Ray Romano, I'll call him. We've set standards for Ranger School for a very long time. I'm adamant about maintaining that. But, though allowing women in Ranger School was supposed to be a one-off, we'll probably run a couple more pilots, Romano says. It's been a real success for us, and we'll see how it goes from there. Now, I'm ex-military myself. I'm familiar with... I've seen the standards that are required, not for Army Rangers, but I've seen the standards that are required to, for example, just to pass Navy boot camp, which is what I went through. And yes, there are 2 sets of standards, which personally I kind of disagree with. It's the idea of I mean, the most I remember was men were required to run 1 mile. No, sorry, it was a mile and a half in 12 minutes. Whereas women were required to run a mile and a half in, I want to say it's closer to 18 or 20 minutes. You know, it's just very upsetting to me that that is a shift there. Um, and some people, I know some people will get angry with me hearing this, saying that I'm a woman hater, blah, blah, blah. No, I am not a misogynist. I am not a woman hater. In fact, I'm a feminist. I believe in empowering women. I believe that women should have equal rights, equal access to all activities. The number one thing that women are definitely lacking in is they deserve equal pay in all areas too. But when it comes to anything where there is a standard set that a man has to accomplish, I honestly believe that a woman should have to accomplish that same standard as well in order to get the same position. It's anything else would be affirmative action. And if you really look at it, affirmative action is no good whatsoever. Affirmative action actually just hurts. It doesn't do any good. It's only harmful. That's it. Once again, this is just my personal opinion. I could be wrong here, but yeah, just my thoughts. But all that being said, I do hope that I do hope that women do enter Ranger School and advance. Now, the other thing is, though, they're talking about revisiting some of the Ranger standards. Okay, that may be fine, and yeah, maybe drop them a little bit so that way it is more accessible to women. But at the same time, I don't feel that they should be. I don't feel that they should split the standards and have this same set of standards for men, but then have these lowered standards for women. I don't know. Moving on. Something to a slightly different kind of story here. News from space. About 6 years ago, scientists discovered a huge ring around Saturn that also happened to be invisible to the naked eye. Now they've learned that it's much bigger than they thought, and their theory on how it came to be might change some thinking about planetary rings and moons. Scientists previously estimated the ring to be about 200 times the radius of Saturn, but now they say it's 30% larger, or about 270 times the radius. It stretches out more than 10 million miles, which a post at phys.org puts into perspective. If Saturn were merely the size of a basketball, this new outer ring would extend nearly 2/3 the length of a football field away from it. Or, as lead author Douglas Hamilton puts it in the Los Angeles Times, it is 10 to 20 times larger than the second biggest ring. So this thing is absolutely gargantuan. Researchers also found that the ring is made up of surprisingly small particles, with only about 10% of them larger than a soccer ball. They suspect the material, which is quite spread out within the ring, comes from the Saturn moon Phoebe, but it was previously believed that debris ejected at such a distance would form a moon rather than a ring. Now it appears such theories will have to be rethought, says the phys.org post. The ring can be detected only in infrared wavelengths. Based on all this, it's possible that Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune have similar rings, reports Wired. Maybe ring isn't even the right word anymore. Maybe we should call them clouds. Those are much harder to detect and convince yourself that they're real. See, I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting news. I mean, and let's not forget, coming up soon, for the life of me, I'm drawing a blank on when exactly it will be, and I'm actually drawing a blank on, pardon, on how long it'll be there. But there is a probe right now on its way towards Pluto. I know we've just recently taken some, like, the first close-up images of Pluto's moon Charon. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. Space will always be interesting to me. I don't know. So I mean, you can expect a lot more stories about space in the future. Here we go. This kind of ties in pretty well with the with the stoner story I covered a little bit ago. Depending on your point of view, Taco Bell's latest creation is either culinary atrocity or genius deliciousness. It is the Cap'n Crunch Delight, which today describes as sweet little donut holes filled with creamy milk icing and enrobed in a delicious layer of Cap'n Crunch Berry's cereal crumbs. The menu addition comes as something of an asterisk to Taco Bell having recently joined the trend of chain restaurants pledging to reduce or ban artificial ingredients from their menus. When it did so, the AP notes that Taco Bell exempted co-branded menu items like its Doritos Locos Tacos. The new dessert comes out July 2nd. Once again, to me, it just, Taco Bell has pretty much always screamed stoner food to me. I mean, it's not bad food, I guess. It's not exactly Mexican, but it's it's fine. But this one just, wow. Sweet little donut holes filled with creamy milk icing and enrobed in a delicious layer of Cap'n Crunch Berry's cereal crumbs. Wow. I mean, it just screams, I'm stoned, man. It'll be awesome. I don't know. Anyway, now we're gonna move on to my favorite section, the asshole of the week. Pardon me. I'm actually gonna try and find the guy's name real quick. My goodness. I had his name. I knew it in my head, and now I'm trying to find it. Oh, I'm sorry. The asshole of the week is a woman, actually. Andrea Lafferty, president of the Traditional Values Coalition. All right, I'm going to see how much time we got, because this is kind of a long story. Okay, yeah, good. I got plenty of time. One of the nation's largest public school systems is preparing to include gender identity to its classroom curriculum, including lessons on sexual fluidity and spectrum. The idea that there's no such thing as 100% boys or 100% girls. Now, first out, before I really get into reading this whole article, I just want to point out that this is from foxnews.com. Not exactly what one would call the most trusted name in news. Matter of fact, I mean, I have a personal policy. Like if I'm watching the news on TV, I never watch Fox. I don't even watch CNN anymore. It's I stick mainly to groups that are outside of the United States, reporting on the United States. If I see a story about something that happened here in the U.S. and it's on BBC, yeah, I'll watch it. If I see it on Al Jazeera, yeah, I'll watch it. If I see it on Fox News, yeah, no, because I already know it's going to be, it's going to be a very Republican, very Christian, conservative take on it, as you will notice in this article. Anyway, Fairfax County Public Schools released a report recommending changes to their family life curriculum for grades 7 through 12. The changes, which critics call radical gender ideology, will be formally introduced next week. The larger picture in this is really an attack on nature itself, the created order, said Peter Sprigg of the Family Research Council. Human beings are created male and female, but the current transgender ideology goes way beyond that. They're telling us you can be both genders, you can be no gender, you can be a gender that you make up for yourself, and we're supposed to affirm all of it. The plan calls for teaching 7th graders about transgenderism and 10th graders about the concept that sexuality is a broader spectrum, but it sure smells like unadulterated sex indoctrination. Get a load of what the kids are going to be learning in middle school. Students will be provided definitions for sexual orientation terms, heterosexuality, homosexuality, and bisexuality, and the gender identity term transgender. The district's recommendations state, emphasis will be placed on recognizing that everyone is experiencing changes and the role of respectful, inclusive language in promoting an environment free of bias and discrimination. 8th graders will be taught that individual identity occurs over a lifetime and includes the component of sexual orientation and gender identity. Individual identity will also be described as having 4 parts: biological gender, gender identity, which includes transgender, gender role, and sexual orientation, which includes heterosexual, bisexual, and homosexual. The district will also introduce young teenagers to the concept that sexuality is a broader spectrum. By 10th grade, they will be taught that one's sexuality develops throughout a lifetime. Emphasis will be placed on an understanding that there is a broader, boundless, and fluid spectrum of sexuality that is developed throughout a lifetime. The document states, sexual orientation and gender identity terms will be discussed with focus on appreciation for individual differences. As you might imagine, parents are freaking out. Parents need to protect their kids from this assault, said Andrea Lafferty, president of Traditional Values Coalition. Who could imagine that we are in this place today, but we are. Last week, the school board voted to include gender identity in the district's non-discrimination policy, a decision that was strongly opposed by parents. Lafferty, who led the opposition to the non-discrimination policy, warned that the district is moving towards a deconstruction of gender. At the end of this is the deconstruction of gender. Absolutely, she told me. The majority of people pushing this are not saying that, but that clearly is the motivation. Pardon. School board spokesman John Torr told the Washington Times the proposed curriculum changes have nothing to do with last week's vote to allow boys who identify as girls to use the bathrooms and locker rooms of their choice. He would have us believe it was purely coincidental. To make matters worse, Lafferty contends parents will not be able to opt their children out of the classes because the lessons will be part of the mandatory health curriculum. However, Torr told me that parents will indeed be able to opt out of these classes, including the sexual orientation and gender identity lessons. They are not being forthright with the information, Lafferty said. They are not telling people the truth. They are bullying parents. They are intimidating and they are threatening. I must confess that I'm a bit old school on sex education. I believe that God created male and female. My reading of the Bible does not indicate there were dozens of other options. However, I'm always open to learning new things. So I asked the school district to provide me with the textbooks and scientific data they will be using to instruct the children that there are dozens and dozens of possible genders. Here's the reply I received from Torr. Lessons have not been developed for the proposed lesson objectives, he stated. Because of the need to develop lessons, the proposed objectives would not be implemented until fall of 2016. In other words, they don't have a clue. And the Family Research Council's Sprigg said there's a pretty good reason why they can't produce a textbook about fluidity. It's an ideological concept, he told me. It's not a scientific one. He warned that Fairfax County's planned curriculum could be harmful to students. It's only going to create more confusion in the minds of young people who don't need any further confusion about sexual identity, he said. The board will introduce the changes on May 21st. Lafferty said she hopes parents will turn out in force to voice their objections. Wow. I mean, it's. I mean, personally, I'm happy that this is coming about. I'm agreeing with the school board on this issue. This is something that should have been taught a long time ago. That the idea of there are some people who are not. No, there are some people who are born men, but don't feel that they belong as men. A great example right now in modern, news right now would be Cynthia Jenner. Or is it Claudia? I think it's either way. The new Jenner. It's allowing Miss Jenner to be discriminated against because she was not born as a woman. That's I'm sorry, but that's out the window. Realistically, I don't believe in allowing discrimination of any kind for any reason on anyone. Pardon. And it's definitely long overdue for telling kids, hey, there are people like this, these people exist, and you need to understand this. So that's pretty good. Anyway, on a completely unrelated story here, there's a new Russian tank that may work on its own one day. Russia's new tank, the Armata, is expected to form the backbone of the nation's armed forces for years to come. Its designers say the new machine may evolve into a fully robotic vehicle that could operate autonomously on the battlefield. Here's a look at some of the key features of the new tank. A remote-controlled turret. The Armata is groundbreaking in having this weapon mount, as well as an internal capsule for the crew that's isolated from ammunition and fuel. A layout that could significantly increase the chances for crew survival if the tank is hit. More room. While previous Russian tanks featured a low silhouette and compact size at the expense of crew comfort, the Armata is significantly larger and heavier. Designers say they put special emphasis on ergonomics. One says the new tank is as pleasant and easy to drive as a modern SUV. Computerized controls. The Armata features a digital control system that directs its movement, tracks targets, and activates the tank's defense systems, freeing the crew from performing routine tasks to allow it to focus on key combat situations. It's like playing a video game, one of the designers says. Pardon. Superior protection. The Armata uses a new type of armor designers say is significantly more resistant to enemy fire. It's also protected by an improved version of reactive armor and is equipped with a so-called active protection system that, when it spots an enemy projectile, fires around to destroy it or knock it off its path. Now I want to jump into the story here for a quick second. For anybody that's not familiar with the concept, reactive armor, what that is it works a lot like the front bumper on your car. What it is you've got this, the back plate would be your steel armor, and then in front of that you've got slightly softer steel that's designed to crumple, which, let's say that the tank gets hit by the main cannon of another tank. It takes a big, super wallop of a hit. Well, the reactive armor is designed to crumple and crush up and slow down the descent of that, slow down the speed, I guess, of that incoming round. before it hits the main steel armor. So that's what reactive armor is. Anyway, final step here. It now has a super cannon. The current Armada is equipped with a standard caliber 125mm cannon that can fire both regular shells and rockets. But designers say a much more powerful 152mm cannon could be easily fitted to the Armada in the future. Now, once again, it's as it mentions, 125mm is kind of standard, but 152mm, that would be just plain monstrous. I'm actually going to pull up a conversion app I've got here just to see and to put it in perspective for those of us here in the United States who aren't that familiar with millimeters and such. 152mm, it comes in just shy of 6 inches. Now, just think of that, 6 inches. And that's how big the bullet is. It would fire bullets, which at that size they're called shells, but still, it's basically a bullet 6 inches across. Wow, that's just excessively monstrous. Oh man, here's another story that I got here that kind of is kind of a rival for Asshole of the Week. I don't know. I don't think that these ones are fully deserving of Asshole of the Week, but if I didn't have that previous story, this one would take the cake here. Couples have been known to hold off on tying the knot until gay marriage is legal. A Christian couple in Australia, however, says they will divorce if gay marriage is allowed. My wife and I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, but later this year we may be getting a divorce, Nick Jensen writes in a piece for the Canberra City News published yesterday. Why? Marriage is the union of a man and a woman before community in the sight of God, and not a human invention. Jensen continues, if Parliament votes to allow same-sex couples to marry, then we no longer wish to be associated with this new definition. Should it come to divorce, Jensen and wife Sarah won't exactly part ways. They'll still live together, perhaps have more kids, use the terms husband and wife, and consider ourselves married by the church and before God. They just won't be legally married. Jensen's piece has drawn plenty of strongly worded criticism, with some readers taking issue with the City News, which news.com.au describes as an independent publication distributed in local businesses, for running it as a cover story. One commenter applauds the genius move to run the article, writing on Facebook, "It's going to do nothing but help the marriage equality cause." Now the country has international pressure to not be so stupid. While the editor of the City News says the article does not reflect the opinion of the paper, he defends his decision to publish it. I think this couple had an interesting angle, and that it was newsworthy. What else we got here? Jensen himself, who says he's received plenty of love mail, defends his stance to the Sydney Morning Herald, noting same-sex marriage would have serious consequences for children who grow up without a mother or father. Expanding the definition of marriage could also pave a path for polygamy. Okay, now my question here, though, is it says it'll have serious consequences for children who grow up without a mother or without a father. Now, what about single-parent households? There are plenty of families all across America and the world where a child is being raised by just their mother, or just their father, or just, you know, just their uncle or aunt, or just their grandfather, just their grandmother. You know, there are plenty of situations like that, and as far as I can tell, those kids turn out just fine. Um, and what about, for example, you remember the long running show Full House? Now, I know I'm talking about a television series and not real life at this point, but I'm pretty sure situations like this have happened in real life, where a group of single guys, single straight men, move in together just because, hey, why not? You share on the bills, so you cut down on each person's individual cost, and it makes sense. And if one of those guys, or maybe if all those guys, just happen to have kids, in the television show, the girls grew up with basically, you could say, 3 dads. And once again, I'm sure that situations like that do exist in real life, and I'm sure those kids turn out just fine without there being any homosexual acts. So, really, considering the fact of, let's be honest, I walked in on my parents a couple times, and that was some of the most harrowing experiences of my life. But aside from that, sexuality was never an issue in my own upbringing, and I grew up in a mother and father household. So I don't see any reason why a father and father or a mother and mother household would be any different. Yeah. I've always been a strong supporter of gay rights, gay marriage, everything. So I don't see I don't see any grounds for this. I don't know, it's just my opinion. And we are coming up in the last 2 minutes or so. So I got kind of a short story here. The United States wants to wage war on this little island for 16 weeks a year. President Obama may have to choose between keeping a tropical paradise as pristine as ever and seeing it transformed into U.S. military training grounds. The Pentagon is toying with the idea of turning Tinian and Pagan, small U.S. territories in the northern Mariana Islands, into a place to stage war 16 weeks a year. What locals, who are U.S. citizens, think. Pagan's mayor says the people are 100% against the move, which some equate to an invasion. The Guardian reports. While Pagan has been uninhabited since a 1981 volcanic eruption, Mayor Jerome Alden says about 50 families aim to return to the 10-mile-long stretch of land. Tinian's 3,000 residents, some of whom own land already leased to the military, could be forced onto a 10-square-mile area, and the plan, which could be put into action by 2017, doesn't just affect people. Biologist Mike Hadfield describes Pagan as a biological treasure trove, boasting rare fruit bats and tree snails. A representative for the Marine Corps in the Pacific told the Los Angeles Times last month, "We would protect it like it was our own." Hadfield's response, "Anyone who believes the U.S. Marines and Navy when they say they'll leave the place better than when they found it must be slightly crazy." The weeks of war games could see major amphibious assaults, ground maneuvers, and the placement of bombing targets on Mount Pagan. Why here? The next decade will see thousands of Marines relocated to Guam from Okinawa. The Pentagon is scrambling for training sites in the region. Pagan is just 330 miles north of Guam and has been ID'd as having beaches big enough for sizable amphibious assaults. Though the Times points out the Marines haven't staged such an assault in combat capacity since 1950. A Change.org petition against the plan has garnered more than 110,000 signatures. Anyway, this has been Brain Power. The next show will be Sunday, June 21st. And as usual, if you have a story you'd like covered here or a question you'd like answered, send me a message on Twitter at BrainPowerUp. Use the hashtag BrainPowerUp, like the group at facebook.com/brainpoweronline, or visit the website at brainpoweronline.webs.com.